Happiness is influenced by factors beyond financial wealth. Research in positive psychology highlights the importance of relationships, purpose, personal growth, and well-being practices. Strong social connections provide emotional support, reduce stress, and enhance life satisfaction. A sense of purpose gives direction and fulfillment, improving resilience and long-term happiness. Personal growth fosters self-confidence and competence through learning, challenges, and self-improvement. Mindfulness, gratitude, and acts of kindness are practical tools that contribute to well-being. Studies show that individuals with strong social ties, meaningful goals, and a commitment to self-improvement report higher life satisfaction than those who focus solely on financial success. While money can provide security, its impact on happiness diminishes beyond a certain point. A balanced approach that prioritizes relationships, purpose, and personal development leads to greater well-being and a more satisfying life.
So before we get started into the questions, I did see messages flashing across the screen very quickly. So greetings to everybody joining us. I did see Talya from Brazil. So thank you for joining us, everybody. So excited that you're here with us. Let me start with Tal. You've called happiness life's ultimate currency. How do you explain to people that happiness is about more than wealth?
Yeah, so, think about it this way. If you had as much money as you wanted, $1 billion just handed over to you, and suddenly you found out that with that $1 billion, you're guaranteed misery. So you'll have all the money in the world that you need, but you're guaranteed misery. Would you take that money? Now, of course, many people would say, when I did it with my kids, they said, well, with $1 billion, I'll find a way to be happy. But what if you really couldn't? Well, then that money wouldn't be worth much to you. You would rather have a lot less money and be guaranteed, or at least have the opportunity to pursue happiness. This goes back thousands of years ago to the idea of Aristotle, who talked about happiness being the highest end, the goal towards which all other goals lead. In other words, at best, money is a means towards happiness, not an end in itself. Happiness is the end. Wealth, potentially, is the means.
So most of us did not have a happiness class in elementary school, middle school, high school, or college. Is it about defining our happiness?
Well, first of all, we need to understand what happiness is. Happiness is not about, is not the same as pleasure, for example. Yeah, sure, pleasure is part of it, but happiness is a much deeper concept, which includes, as we saw in the segment, a sense of meaning and purpose. It comes through gratitude. It certainly comes through cultivating relationships. So happiness is more of a holistic concept and construct. Helen Keller said it more than 100 years ago. To me, the only definition of happiness is wholeness.
Talya, why do people often mispredict what will actually bring them lasting happiness?
Yes, some of it has to do, with our background, meaning our historical background. In the past, there was a great deal of scarcity. There was a great deal of uncertainty. Today, in today's world, for most people, certainly not all, but certainly people who are living in developed or even developing countries, there is more certainty, there is less scarcity. And yet, our brain works in the same way as it did millions of years ago, which means that we equate having enough with being happy, having enough material goods to being happy. And now, since there was always scarcity, there was never enough. So we were never happy, or we only became happier when we thought that we could get more. This mindset is not appropriate for today's world.
Talya, your thoughts?
I want to bring up the notion of what is countable and what looks good on social media as opposed to what feels good. So we're constantly exposed to, we're blasted by images of people consuming things, of people doing things, of people, Friday, soon it's going to be Friday afternoon in the US, having a nice cocktail, going out to dinner. You can do all these things and they're going to look great on social media, granted, of course. But then you have the distinction between hedonic and eudaimonic pleasures. And hedonic are like having a cocktail, having a drink, having fun, all these things that are fun, but they're not fulfilling. I don't want to say they're shallow, it's very judgmental, but you need a good balance between that and the eudaimonic happiness, which is about what am I achieving in my life? Am I connected to people in a meaningful way? Am I helping anyone? Am I making a difference? Am I becoming a better person? Am I proud of myself? And these things bring on a deeper sense of happiness that is more lasting, there's more meaningful, and I think is less dented by someone else having a nicer shirt than me or buying a better purse than me or any of these things that occur and are visible and can look great, can get multiple likes, but don't necessarily bring us happiness. And while we're on the topic of likes, I want to talk about the idea of a treadmill, and Kahneman discussed it years ago, that there's a happiness treadmill. It really relates to what Tal was talking about in terms of what we have. I have more now than I ever thought I would, honestly, but I don't wake up every morning and say, oh my God, which is a shame, by the way, because I adjust. We all adjust. So we adjust to what we have and we stop being impressed by it or overjoyed by it, and we compare upward. We compare to people who have more, better. We don't compare downward. We don't say, hey, I have it really good, actually. Yay, that's enough. That's fantastic. And this is, it's on a different level from finding one's life's purpose and one's eudaimonic joy. But it is also important on the more materialistic level. It's like it's a good exercise for us to try and practice.
It's interesting because the goalposts are always moving. It's changing. We think that, okay, I'm happy today, but then tomorrow comes along and you see somebody drive by in some like classic sports car or something, and you say, oh, I'm not really doing as good as I thought. Scott, exactly. I want to ask you about tightwads or spendthrifts. Do tightwads or spendthrifts tend to experience more emotional friction about happiness and money?
Yeah, so for people not familiar with the terms, my research has found that there are some people who we affectionately call tightwads who are kind of frustrated with their inability to spend in ways that they think they should. There are vacations that they think they should take, but they just can't spend the money on it. That's a very frustrating experience. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some spendthrifts who tend to spend too much, know that maybe I don't really need this, or I might get kind of bored with it, but they just can't, the brakes on the car don't work and they can't stop themselves from getting it. So these are two really interesting types of people who money kind of is often taking them away from happiness, but in very different ways, kind of not spending enough or spending too much. But the good news is like there are ways to kind of adjust that and develop a different sense of distress when spending money. Some have too much of it, some have not enough, but there are ways to work around it.
So both can be unhappy, both can be happy. It's just, I guess, what lens are you looking through?
Sure. And yeah, what are you worried about? They both want to, prevent bad things from happening, but they have different bad things in mind. Like a tightwad might be worried about going broke, even if their bank accounts look wonderful. You might look at them objectively and say they would not really have any anxiety about spending money, but they're really worried about going broke. Whereas the spendthrift might be worried about, what if I get to the end of my life and I haven't lived like a good, adventurous, rich, a lot of variety and novelty? They're worried about that. And so those worries can become kind of overwhelming. And ideally, you could find like some balance between the two.
Let me ask the panel, what are your thoughts on the research that says that, after a certain dollar amount, that it doesn't make as much of a difference. Is there only marginal gain after a certain point?
Yeah, I know there's been some very recent research on this, and there's a lot of questions about methods and how do you interpret the data properly, and maybe people at different levels are reading the question differently. But I think intuitively, it does make some sense that certainly once you've gotten past fulfilling the basic needs and some extra little varieties, that there's only so much. There's diminishing returns. I think that basic finding makes a lot of sense.
So
Yeah, and
I was at sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Talya, please.
I was at the University of Princeton when Angus Deaton, Nobel Prize winner Angus Deaton, came up with the finding that happiness does go up, but in a logarithmic way. So it does add to your additional financial benefits, do add to your happiness, but not in a linear way, but in a logarithmic way. So there are diminishing returns. I think the question we need to ask ourselves, because most of us will not be faced with the question of, do you want to make another $100,000 a year, 200, 300,000? That's not really the question. I think the question for us should be, how am I living my life? Or even how am I making my money? Because money is accountable. I mean, it's something that you can count. You make $1 million a year. Wow, you make 3 millions. Amazing, amazing, amazing. More than me, because I only make 5. You make 7. It's very easy to count, and it's very easy to have people be impressed by it and for us to be impressed by it. And the question is, how am I making this money? And what am I doing alongside making this money? Because if I'm making money in a way that's making me miserable, if I am working my butt off, to be making this money, and I'm pushing myself away from my family, and I don't have a moment to breathe, and all I base my self-esteem on is my money, that may not be very healthy for me. So these are other things to consider, because when you're making $7 million, that's a beautiful amount of money, and nobody's asking you, listen, you live. So I'm in Cambridge right now, Cambridge, UK. So have you managed to walk by the river like last week? Did you go on Jesus Green? It's so beautiful. Did you have an ice cream? Nobody will ever ask you these questions, but this will really add to your happiness. So to balance it out, I think is crucial. It's important. Even if nobody counts that and your bank manager is unimpressed by you having an ice cream on Jesus Green.
And I want to go back to the idea of happiness being the ultimate currency. If you do look at happiness as the ultimate currency, then you can actually measure or evaluate rather, the benefits of each one of your actions. So how much is it worth to me that I have, say, the extra $50,000 in the bank? Well, if my basic needs are not met, a lot. But if my basic needs are met, then it's going to add very little to my happiness. However, how much is spending an extra 2 hours a week with my best friends or with my loved ones? How much is that going to add to the ultimate currency, the currency of happiness? Now, if there is a trade-off, and there often is, because I may need to stay extra hours at work to make that extra money, then I can evaluate what's contributing more to my happiness. But again, the question is not, how can I make more money? Once basic needs are met, how can I become happier? And if the answer is work harder, make more money, then by all means, put in the extra effort. But if the answer is I'll get more if I spend more time with loved ones, or maybe get an extra hour of sleep, or take another week's vacation once every 3 months, or do work that is meaningful to me, that is purposeful, even though I make less money, well, then the choice is very clear. Again, money in and of itself has no value. It's only has value in terms of what it can attain for us. And one of the things that it can attain potentially is life's ultimate currency.
I love this thinking. And all of you have presented that we do have to take time to think about how work, money, how it influences our identity, our priorities, and then sacrifices in our choices. And based on what Tal just said, I need to figure out how to make money while I'm sleeping. Let's go to segment 2. We're going to talk about this concept of what is enough.